Once upon a time, in a very large forest, there was a cabin with a very small family. This cabin had two small children, Hansel and Gretel. They had a stepmother and a father. Their father was a woodworker who worked very, very hard, but still did not have the money or the means to care for his family properly. One day, after working all day, he ventured home to the complaints of his wife, complaining that the children were always whining and needing to be fed and never cleaning up their toys. And she told him that he had to do something about this situation, and she wanted these children out of her house. So she came up with a plan to take them deep into the forest, get them sidetracked, and leave them for the wolves. So Hansel was sitting outside of the door listening of her evil scheme the entire time. So he decided to sneak outside and gather white pebbles. He put them in his pockets and he went back inside. Early the next morning, the stepmother called for the children. She told them to come and eat their breakfast because they had a very big day in store. They ventured out into the forest. Their father took them to places that he had just recently logged. He showed them a cattle farm. They went down this gigantic hill. They found a stream and crossed it. They came to a little clearing where on the other side was the majestic forest. It was the creepy, dark, scary forest that made their hearts jump just seeing. Well, that's where they stopped, though. They stopped in the clearing. They gathered rocks and put them in a circle, and their dad started a fire. He told the children to stay by the fire and keep it going while he went to gather bigger logs. So the children did as they were told, and they stayed there, putting kindling in the fire. That's when Hansel decided to tell Gretel of the evil scheme his stepmother has devised, and that their father would not be returning for them. But not to be scared, he told her that he gathered the pebbles and he had secretly been dropping them along the path. The moon shone so bright that night that the white pebbles glittered like snow on a winter day. They followed the stones back across the river, up the big hill, and they somehow safely made it back to their house. When they entered their house, they found that the stepmother had already rid the whole house of their belongings. So, cold and tired and no beds to sleep in, they cuddled together by the fire in the living room. The next morning, when the father woke to his prayers had been answered, his children had been spared by the wolves and somehow safely made it back home. He was overjoyed, but as soon as the stepmother woke and saw that the happiness on the father of his children were home safely, she was instantly outraged. She took the children by the arms. She dragged them out of the house, back to the woods. She told them, "You will not be finding your way back this time, children." She took them down the big hill, back across the bridge, back through the clearing, and into the haunted woods. The very instant you stepped into these woods, it seemed like the trees were looking upon you. It seemed like the air turned toxic and you could not breathe anymore. Everything had eyes, and the creatures were just waiting to ravish on these children. They had been traveling all day. They didn't have anything to eat that day or the day before, and they had no more energy to keep going. Their little legs just gave out, and they fell fast asleep, where the mother went back home and left the children to be eaten by the wolves and the bears. The next morning, as the bright sun rose, the children woke and saw that they were not dreaming, that they had actually been, again, abandoned in the woods. And this time in the majestic woods where there was evil goings on. So they knew that the only chance that they had for survival was to venture through these woods. So they kept going, and it seemed as if they had a guardian angel to keep the wolves and the bears at bay. They could feel them closing in on them the deeper they go into the forest. Finally, they came upon a house. It was a small little cottage with colorful little windows and beautiful roofs and a wonderful design of this beautiful little cottage. And that's when they decided they were free, they were safe, they were going to be able to find their way home. So they got nearer and nearer, and they realized that the toxic air had lifted, and all they could smell was the smell of sweet, fresh gingerbread. Oh my goodness, the house was a gingerbread house decorated with all kinds of candies and cakes and icing, and it was fabulous. And they were starving, so they ran to the house and they started picking gumdrops and peppermints and icing off of the roof and handfuls of candy out of the walls. They were going crazy when all of a sudden, from inside the house, they hear this shrieking old voice say, "Nibble, nibble, little mouse." And then all of a sudden, this fragile old lady appeared in the doorway. "Who's nibbling on my house?" she said. "Oh, my, dear children, it is you. How did you get in this forest? You must come in at once. I will take care of you. There is nothing to fear." She fed them marvelous food, and she laid out a bed for them, and soon they found that they were so comfortable they fell fast asleep. While they were sleeping, the witch took Hansel into a small room where she locked him in, and she woke Gretel, telling her to go out and fetch water because she is to cook magnificent meals for her brother. She went out, she fetched the water, she did as she was told. When she came back in, she asked the old woman where her brother was. And the old woman replied that he was resting in his room and that he needed to get fat. And Gretel asks, "Why does he need to get fat?" And she says, "Well, my dear, we will be eating him." Wahahaha. And Gretel stood in horror, knowing what she was doing. She was cooking to fatten up her brother to eat him. How horrifying. She whipped Gretel day in and day out, making her cook and clean and slave away to feed her brother, her beloved brother, knowing that he was going to be the meal. Well, she one night told Hansel of what was going on, and she told him not to eat the food. Well, Hansel could not eat the food. It was magnificent food. He had to eat like crazy. So he decided that every day when she would come and test the plumpness of his fingers, he would stick out a chicken bone. Quite smart of a kid. So every day she would come to the door, and on the 5th day, when she come to test the plumpness of his finger, he stuck out the chicken bone like usual, and she grew so angry. She started flinging things around, and she started unlocking the door, screaming in rage. And Hansel, though, heard the locks clicking, and he was ready on the other side of the door. At the slightest turn of the handle, he ran. He knocked open the door, he knocked down the old witch, and him and Gretel threw her into the wood stove that was so hot from cooking day in and day out that through her blood-curdling screams they felt joy and free. They ran through the woods, ran and ran, and then by the miracle of God they found their way back home to their beloved father. When they ran into the house, he was bent over in the chair crying, for he had went back to find his children, and he thought that they were dead. when they figured out that the stepmother was also the wicked witch, and that when they killed the witch, they killed the wicked stepmother, and they were free forever from the horrifying being. And they lived happily ever after. The end.